honestly, thanks for having us out. It's incredible to be here with you guys. It's incredible to hear what is happening in your midst, what you guys are bringing to me. So, because we speak the same language, I tonight just want to teach you a new phrase. That's it. Next month, we'll learn another phrase. The month after that, we'll learn another phrase. Doing outreach, the kind that we are involved in, it really is about learning a new way of living, learning a new way of speaking. And so as leaders, it's so important that you learn that language first, and so many of you have. But that's really kind of my goal, is just each month, just kind of learning a new concept, a new phrase in that kind of outreach type language. So I am really passionate about leadership development. It's one of the most important things for me. I get to do a lot of it in Los Angeles with people that we work with. And so I'm really excited that I get to be here with you guys as well. I kind of made a quick sheet for you guys. I think it's helpful to be able to follow along, to write your own words. It helps remember a little bit the new terminology that we'll be talking about tonight. I'm also going to set a timer because I hate people who have like 7 different endings when they're speaking. Pastors, it's like, just doing the lap.
Land the plane.
Yes, I know, seriously, just like landed already. So I've got a timer so that you guys know I'm aware of that. Okay, so I love the Bible, specifically the Old Testament. It is a sketchy book. There's crazy stuff that happens in there, but there's phenomenal concepts when it comes to this idea of being a leader. So tonight I want to start at the very beginning. Genesis 1. Allow me to read a couple verses to you guys. It says this: In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So at the very beginning, God confronts this place, right? It is formless, it's void, it's dark. There's the ocean, there's the deep, there's nothing happening. All of those things combined create chaos. Chaos is essentially complete disorder and confusion. It's also defined as what existed before there was creation. So God, before He creates, He's confronted with this thing called chaos. Now, there's something really interesting, and I just kind of learned about this a couple weeks ago. But in the Old Testament, there's all these accounts of creation. There's Genesis, but then there's a few Psalms in Job, and it kind of references back to what God did in the beginning. But it kind of adds on a little bit. And there's this idea in these passages that chaos, in a sense, is kind of this adversary of God. It's really interesting. I did not believe it the first time I heard it, but I want to read a couple things to you guys and kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So in Psalms chapter 74, dig here real quick. If you have a Bible or a phone, you can pull it up. Psalm chapter 74, verse 12 to 17. This is something really interesting. It says this. Context of this chapter real quick. The Israelites are going into exile. They've just been defeated. They've seen the temple destroyed. They've seen the city burned down. They've seen the enemies overtake God's children. And they're asking God, what are you doing? Why is this happening? So this passage, they are confronted with chaos. And they're saying, hey, wait a second. The God that we serve, He's confronted chaos before. Let's remember what He's did before. So this is what they remember. Yet God, my King, is from of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. And they say this: you divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. It's kind of crazy. You crushed the heads of Leviathan, one of the sea monsters. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. You split open springs and brooks. You dried up ever-flowing streams. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You have established the heavenly lights and the sun. You have fixed all the boundaries of the earth. You have made summer and winter. So, some crazy stuff's happening. In this Psalms, God splits the sea. He defeats these sea monsters. He establishes day and night. There's kind of these creation type kind of elements happening in it. And if you don't attach it to creation, you just kind of pass it. That's what I always did. As soon as I talk about sea monsters, I'm like, that's weird. What's happening? Trust me, this all ties into the Delta Block somehow. Leviathan ties into the Delta Block, and I'm going to get there. Just hang with me. So, the second place that's super fascinating is in Job, actually. Let me get there real quick. Also, it's talking about this idea of God creating. Job 38, 8 through 11. Bless you. It says this: Who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swallowing wind, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, Thus far you shall come, and no farther. And here shall your proud waves be stayed. Something interesting that happens in this psalm is that God closes the sea in. He limits the seas with breakers. He sets bars and doors. He stops the sea. The reason I'm saying all this is that in the ancient Near East, there's these other stories about creation, different than the Genesis account. The Genesis account is kind of a critique of these other stories. But there's one in particular called the Enuma Elish. It was the Babylonian story. And those of you who have read it or are familiar with it, you kind of know the concept. Basically, in the Enuma Elish, there's this god, Marduk. He defeats the sea, and then he splits it, and he creates the heavens and the earth from it. But there's something very interesting. The Enuma Elish was written as a story, and it was kind of written to show how the gods were far superior than humans. The humans were created just to serve the gods. That was kind of the way the story goes. But in that story, there's elements of chaos. The sea is seen as the enemy. So in Genesis, when you read these other passages, God, in a sense, is warring with this element of chaos found in the sea. And in Job, he closes it in, he limits it, he sets bars and doors, he stops it, all these very violent images. And think about this is crazy. The sea, the Pacific, is like 5,520 miles wide from here to Japan. And have you ever thought about the idea that all that ocean stops within a few feet of itself on the coast? Countless, it stops. Countless, it stops. And in the Bible, it says, God says, I'm the one who stops it. So, in Genesis, in the very beginning, you've got God, and he's looking at this place, and there's nothing good about it. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Everybody just can't stand Cleveland, Ohio. Every time anyone talks about it, like, dude, I'm so sorry you're from Cleveland. It's the worst place ever. Seriously, I've been here my entire life. And that's just what people talk about. People kind of look at it as this place that there's no value in there. Why? You know, what's going on? When God looked at earth, there was nothing about it that was valuable. It was formless, it was void, it was dark, it was just chaos. In a Delta Block. That's what our neighborhoods look like sometimes. That's what people's lives look like sometimes. You look at it and you're like, there's nothing. Other people would say that. There is nothing going on. We are tasked with seeing the potential in that. I'm going to get to that in a second. That's what is incredible about what we do. What you guys are doing here in this city, you're seeing something that no one else has seen. That's what we're called to do. So, the beginning, chaos. Second part, creation. How does God respond to this chaos? What actually happens? Now, there's a couple things that God does, and I think they're on your sheet. But the first thing that God does, and this is the thing, I love talking about this because it just gets me floored. But the first thing God does is this. And God said. He speaks. So, I love words. I love them, I love them, I love them. Because words equal creation. Words are, in a sense, how we create things. You think of some of the greatest leaders of our time, people who have led peace movements, you think of the Founding Fathers, you think of people who have created a new reality for people. They use their words. Words are creation in a sense. They're so powerful, they're so important. And the interesting thing is that Genesis is a critique of this Enuma Elish story. In the Enuma Elish, the gods are warring and they're using their hands and they're doing crazy stuff to create. God doesn't do that. It's a very distinct difference. It says, no, when God creates, he uses his words. He does it very differently. So, words are creative. They have that power because of them. And what words do is they create new realities in people's lives. They bring new realities into existence. They create new realities in people's lives. They create hope where there was despair, love where there was hate, order where there was chaos. And so many times in my own life, when there was chaos going on, people who helped change that used their words. Because that's what they do. Now, this is the crazy thing about this, is that when God creates everything, the land, the fish, the animals, the plants, he uses his words to do it, right? But there's a distinct difference when it gets to humans. In Genesis, he creates them differently. So what God does is when he gets to humans, he doesn't just use his words, he acts, he uses his hands. He gets down, and humans are the only thing in creation that are made from both heaven and earth. They're the only thing. They're made from the dust of earth and from the breath of heaven.
Wow.
God breathed in humans. He gave them the ability to also use words. He didn't do that for anything else. And it's very specific because in this anomaly story, the humans are seen as the slaves of the gods. They are there only to serve the gods. But in Genesis, it's incredible because God says, no, you have a role in this thing called creation. I, who created with my words, gift you the ability to also speak, and therefore to also create. So that's the crazy thing about it, is that God shares his creative roles with us, with humans. He shares it with us. And it's just a phenomenal, phenomenal concept. That's why words are so powerful. Words can also be used, obviously, for terrible purposes. That's why words like stupid, loser, failure, that's why those are also so powerful, is because that is an abuse of the gift that God gave us. When people use those kind of words over people's lives, they're abusing a divine gift. They're abusing the ability to create. And in turn, instead of creating something good, they're creating something so evil. And I think a lot of people that we serve here in Lake Elsinore, in LA, the people that we're reaching out to, they've heard those too often. The only thing that has been created over their lives are those destructive things. That's why what we're doing is so much different. That's why they resonated with it, because they're not familiar with that. The people in LA, there's people we minister to who are experiencing homelessness. There's young kids that have been abused. Anything that you guys find here, we have over there too. And the things that have been spoken over them, the realities that have been created over them, it's saddening. It breaks my heart. And that's why what we bring is so much more powerful. It's so much. It's so important. It is so important that we use our words to create well, because the people who we minister to, they have not heard the word they need to. Another kind of idea as far as words go. This is something that Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about. He says that when we speak, we also have to act. So our speaking and our action, they have to go hand in hand because of two different things. He says with God, such is not the case. God's words are his actions. Therefore, when he creates, he used his words because he is creating. God's actions, God's words are the same thing. Probably why, maybe one of the reasons that when Jesus came, he's called the Word, because he is the action of God on earth. Wow. He's not called God action. He's not called God's hands and feet. He's called the Word, because he is the action of God in person. Something that's different between God and us. But when God responds to chaos, he speaks, he uses his words to create. The second thing that God does when he responds to chaos is that he divides and he limits. Now, something really interesting is that the two elements, kind of the big elements that make up chaos, are darkness and the sea. These are things that throughout the Bible are kind of these adversaries of God. So what God does is in Genesis 1:3 and in Genesis 1:6, I won't read to you guys, so you can hear it from the horse's mouth here. But in Genesis 1:3, it says this: God separated the light from the darkness. So God divides darkness with light. Verse 6, it says this: God separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. God, when he sees chaos, he divides it and he limits it. That's what God does when he sees chaos. Sometimes we like him to do something different when he sees chaos, but that's not what he's in the business of doing. When he responds to chaos, he divides and he limits it. We'll come back to that point in a second. But this is something else that I also love. God is in the business of repurposing chaos. I'm going to read something for you guys. It's this book. It's called Creation, the Persistence of Evil. It asks some really, really powerful questions about God and creating. But it says this: chaos does not disappear, but rather is transformed during the act of creation. So, something that I struggle with is when I see people whose lives are in chaos, when I see neighborhoods going through chaos, I want it to go away. I want it to stop. I want the chaos just to end. Like, it pains me when people are making these kind of choices and they're living in this kind of this darkness and this voidness and they're just living on these choices. And I just want it to stop for them. I want it to go away. But when God created, he didn't destroy chaos. He repurposed it. And this is why I think God does not destroy chaos, is because chaos is pregnant with potential for good. Chaos is not something that is evil in of itself. It is pregnant with potential for good. God, what he does is he looks at chaos and says, hey, there's this voidness, this darkness, this formlessness. I'm going to bring some light out of it. I'm going to bring land out of it. I'm going to bring the animals out of it. I'm going to ultimately bring humans out of it. God does not destroy it. He repurposes it. We have that same responsibility. In your city, in the lives of people that we're ministering to, we cannot hope that it is destroyed. We cannot hope that chaos goes away. People are going to make the same decisions over and over and over again. And we've got to be there every time, pulling order out of that and saying, hey, this is what you're doing, but let me show you what the good is from this and what God wants to actually do in your life. That's our role as leaders in an Adopted Block, as serving the community. It's not going to go away. So instead, we have to repurpose it because it's not supposed to go away. When God saw it, he didn't destroy it, he repurposed it. So, for example, out of the sea came land, out of darkness came light, out of chaos came rest. One of the questions that trips at people a lot about this idea of God or Christianity is the idea that, well, if God is all powerful, why is there evil in the world? You hear that a lot. Possibly because chaos is pregnant with potential for good. Possibly because the God who is so powerful, he brings good out of anything. The New Testament talks about that. That all things work together for you. Amen. Maybe because they're pregnant with the possibility. But God's Spirit has to be present. You see it in the beginning. It says there's chaos, there's void, there's formlessness going on, but the Spirit of God is hovering over it. When his Spirit is involved, that's when there's potential for good. He's got to be involved. He cannot do this alone. His Spirit has to be active and present. When it's active and present, good is going to happen. So basically, we talk about creation in the beginning. I want to fast forward 4,000 years, 2,000 years, something like that. So basically, God sees his fullness, his holiness, his chaos, and he brings good out of it. He brings humans into the equation, but then obviously in the story, humans fall. Chaos kind of tries to seep back into the world. You've got the whole Old Testament, and then you've got Jesus come onto the scene. The Word, the action of God comes onto the scene and says, hey, I'm going to take all of this on myself. I'm going to do something you cannot do. I'm going to bring heaven to earth. I'm going to bring God's love in this place. I'm going to bring this reality down here. That's what Jesus does. But we are then also tasked to be a part of that. So, what now is our role in the world? What is our role? As leaders, as Christian ministers in this society, what is our role in our neighborhood, in the lives of people that are surrounding us? The first, and this is kind of the next section, so this is on rest and recreation. I love that Brett and April were talking about rest. We do the same thing with our site leaders. The problem is none of them want to rest once a month. But I would say, and this book that I'm pulling from would say that the only way for us to really participate in God's recreation is through the door of rest. If you are not resting, it is very hard for you to sustain an active participation in what God wants you to do.
That's right.
So that is why it is essential. It's so important. So something really, really phenomenal. The first thing is that we have to participate in God's rest. And Levinson, the author of this book, says something fascinating. He says that when God creates, every day there's a day, there's a night. And now, in this biblical idea, darkness is part of chaos. So there's day, there's the light, and then there's dark. There's day, then there's light, there's dark. The only day where there is no night is the Sabbath. When God rests, there is no night. And it's a fascinating idea that even though there is chaos in this world, even though there are broken people that we're going to minister, even though there's brokenness within our own heart and the heart of the city that surrounds us, there is a foreshadowing that one day will not be so anymore. That this rest, this 1 day a week rest where there's no night, as in Genesis it says that there's no night, is a foreshadowing of what is ultimately to come.
Amen.
But we have the responsibility to bring that in. So we participate in the rest of God, and we actively participate in His recreation. The second thing is that we have to embrace that creation involves struggle. Anyone who has brought anything into existence, whether it's a parent, whether it's a community worker, whether it's you guys, you know that when you create something, when you bring new life into existence, struggle and ultimately even death is a result. You will die in the process. It's just the way it works. The pride, the you wanting things to go the way that you think they will go, that has to die in the process. Creation involves that struggle. It involves that death. I believe that God knows all things, so I have to believe that in the very beginning, when He's bringing this whole world into existence, I think He knew that the people He was creating would kill Him at some point. They would require Him to die. Jesus, when He came, He is God. He had to die for the sins of the earth. I think that God knew, hey, I'm bringing this thing in, but I know the cost that it's going to require. I know that I'm going to have to die in the process. So when we're creating things, if we are not willing to accept that as just a reality, it will be very hard for us to continue on. Because when struggle comes, when conflict comes, when ultimately we are asked to sacrifice what we really want and we to die, we won't be able to handle that. I've seen so many people just they did this thing for a while, they confronted that kind of breaking point where they're like, hey, wow, I didn't know this was going to cost this much of me. I'm not willing to pay that price. And they couldn't keep going. They had to walk away from that. I was 4 months in to the Dream Center, LA, and I was telling Brett this. 4 months in, and I didn't really know the cost. And I also had the thing that I think most of us might have is the problem of saying yes to everything. So I didn't really, factor in this whole rest idea like God tells us to. So I was just kind of doing everything. 4 months in, we have this big bike giveaway. We give away thousands of bikes, thousands of toys. That day, I didn't know that I had mono that day. So I woke up, I felt the worst in the world, but I was a big part of this big event, so I was like, oh, I've got to happen. I've got to make this happen. So I get up, we had a big bus we took to our site. Haley and I ride the bus, and it fits like 45 people. We had 97 on the bus. Completely illegal. We would have gotten in so much trouble had we didn't stop. But we get them in church. There's about 10,000 people that come through that day. They get their stuff. We take it back. I leave for home the next day, and I'm just completely spent. I'm completely gone. I didn't rest really the last 4 months. I get home, I'm in the ER, and in that moment I realized two things. Number one, I didn't rest like I should have. But number two, that maybe this kind of life was going to require a little bit more than I thought it would. And I had to decide, am I willing to actually make this sacrifice? Am I willing to participate in this recreation, which is going to cost me everything, but also rest? And I almost went back, because I went to school on the East Coast. And when I was home, I was like, there's a position open. I don't have to stay in California. They've taken everything from me. Like, my health is gone, my sanity's gone. Like, I'm done. I'm spent. I'm over it. And God, through several different people, kind of confirmed that I should come back. But we all, I think, at some point, if you haven't already, you will get to that point where you realize this is going to cost you a lot more than you thought it would. The only way to be able to pay that price is through rest. You have to have a cycle of rest. Otherwise, you can pay that price and you're just going to burn out. It's not going to be sustainable. So, first thing is we've got to participate in the rest of God in order to be able to recreate and to be a part of that. And the second thing is that we have to embrace the fact that creation involves struggle. Ultimately, it involves us to die to ourselves. Third thing is that we have to repurpose chaos. We cannot eliminate it. Again, we take buses to our dog collect sites and we bring folks from the neighborhoods to church on Thursdays and on Sundays. And there's a lot of young kids, a lot of high school kids. And on Thursday nights, everyone's amped. They've been at school all day. They just want to get away from the Section 8 housing they live in. So there's just a lot of just chaos happening. There's just so much going down. And it's really hard to kind of lead in that context because nobody's listening to you, everybody's cussing you out. It's just like the worst thing ever. There's so many times when I was with Haley, we were riding these buses together before we were even dating, before we could actually date. The dream setting, you can't even date for the first year you're there, so there's all this tension, Not on her end, just on my end. But anyway, so we're there with these kids and they're crazy, and you're going crazy because you can't talk to the woman you love about feelings. So there's a lot of times where I just want this chaos to stop. I'm like, please, guys, can you just be like everybody else? Why do you have to act this way? And something that one of my coworkers said was that there's this phenomenal idea that kids will respond to attention. Their parents, their teachers often give them attention only when they're doing what's wrong.
Yeah.
So it's only negative attention. So they will only do what's wrong because they know they'll get noticed that way. They'll know they'll get attention that way. So the idea is if you repurpose that, you don't eliminate that because that's just them, but if you repurpose it and say, hey, I will give attention to the good. I will only give attention to the good. When you do something wrong, we'll talk about it, be like, hey, dude, bummer, I'm sorry you did that. But now because you did that, you're going to have to bring your mom to church next time because you're having a tough time respecting. But you don't give attention to that. Instead, you swing it around and you say, hey, I'm going to repurpose this chaos and give attention to the good. There's a lot of different contexts that can work. But the idea is this, is that if we are trying to eliminate chaos, we're going to fail. We have to repurpose it. In Adopted Block, I love that the end goal is to build relationships. The end goal is not to change the neighborhood. The neighborhood will change once the relationships are built, once people know that you're there to serve them, but that's not the end goal. Because if that was the end goal, if the goal was simply we're going to change this place, people would know that. People would know the only reason you're there, the only reason you're trying to build some kind of relationship with them is because you want them to change. You want them to stop being the way they are. But when you're there to just sit in the dirt with them or walk through the door and say, hey, I would just love to get to know you a little better. When your end goal is to build relationships, that is when the true change happens. And not just the change in their lives, but the change in yours as well.
That's right.
Good. But the end goal has to be to build relationships. So it's the same kind of idea. If the end goal is just to end the chaos, to change the neighborhood, to have people stop talking about Lincoln and Elsinore the way they've been talking about it, if that's the focus, you're not going to get there. And people are going to know that's the focus. The end goal has to be to build relationships, to repurpose chaos, not to eliminate it. This is something that I love, love, love. When we are participating in God's rest, His recreation, what we do is we add value to things that have been degraded and devalued. Again, I live in Ohio, and LeBron James is a pretty good basketball player, and he grew up outside of Cleveland and played for the team for a little bit, and he ended up leaving. If anyone knows anything about any kind of sports, you'll probably have known that. But something fascinating happened when he decided to come back. Cleveland is one of those cities that's just been kind of just going down, since like the 1920s. And living there was just kind of this, seriously, there was like a million people in the 1920s, and then it's just been flowing ever since. And living there, there's just kind of this hopelessness that anything would ever change. But when there was talk of him coming back, something fascinating happened. People kind of started believing again, people started taking pride again, and again, it's just an analogy, but something changed. And this is fascinating. LeBron James is, I'm not going to say the best basketball player, but he's one of the better basketball players in basketball. And he could have picked to go anywhere after Miami. He had a couple of championships under his belt. He'd been to 4 or 5 in a row. He could have picked any city to go to. Cleveland's not all that great, really isn't. He could have went to New York, he could have went to LA, go to some big city, but he said, no, I'm going back home, I'm going back to Cleveland. So what he did when he went back home is he added value to a place that had been degraded and devalued. He said, hey, I'm going back here, and I'm going to add value to this team, I'm going to add value to this city, I'm going to make it something that people thought it wasn't. What adopted life is, what you are a part of, is you are adding value to people into a city that has been devalued. When you say, hey, Saturday morning, the most valuable time of my week, time is the most valuable thing you have. It's the most valuable thing you can spend. And when you spend the most valuable part of that on people, on your city, you're saying, I am placing the greatest value in this place. I'm not giving you my Mondays, my Tuesdays, my Wednesday nights. I'm giving you my Saturday morning. I'm supposed to be watching, football and cartoons. I'm giving that to you, the most valuable time I have. And what you do is when you do that, you elevate the value of your neighborhood. That's what Alpha Club is all about. It's about saying, hey, South Central LA, East LA, Skid Row, these places have been degraded and devalued by every part of our society. Businesses won't open there, the government doesn't want to go there, nobody's starting anything there. Wow. But when 300 people from the Dream Center show up and say, hey, we're giving you what we've got, the best time of the week we have, we elevate the value. Not only in the city's mind or the community's mind, but in the hearts of the people. If they can say, hey, these people are giving me the best time they have to come to my neighborhood and knock on my door to serve me, maybe it's possible that I'm actually valuable enough for them to do that. Maybe there's something more about me that I haven't noticed before. Maybe I'm more valuable than my teachers or my parents have told me. That's what you do every single Saturday. That's what accountable is about. It's about adding value to places that you value. That's a great thing. The reason I love Genesis so much is because there's some theological thought that when Lucifer fell from heaven, that earth was possibly the place he fell to. Hence the reason it's chaotic, it's dark, it's formless, it's void, nothing good's about it. That's a thought. That's one thought. I'm not saying that's gospel, but that's a thought. How powerful is it that God looks at this place that's housing the person who rebelled against him, who threw the coup in heaven and said, hey, yes, this place is degraded, it's devalued. I'm going to bring you back to it. I'm going to bring something good out of it. That is what we do. So that's how we participate in this rest of new creation, is we add value to things that have been devalued. The last thing, I've got like 10 minutes, is that we have to be able to imagine a new world out of the void, formless, dark places in our city and in people's lives. If you are unable to imagine something different than the current reality, it's very hard to bring change. The thing that I love about what you guys are doing, the thing I love about what Brett, your leadership, is talking about, is that he's able to reimagine something. He's able to say, hey, yes, this is what's going on around us, but step away with me and let's imagine for something different. Let's think not in what we see, but what God sees and what the potential for this place holds.
Amen.
Having a holy imagination is essential to bringing about the kingdom of heaven on earth. When Jesus came, there's this verse. It's a phenomenal verse. It says, the kingdom of heaven has been coming violently, and the violent take it by force.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was the first person to come from heaven and said, hey, I'm bringing heaven here. In heaven, there's no sickness, there's no death, there's no pain. I'm bringing that, just a taste of it here. We as his disciples are challenged to continue that work, to continue to bring heaven to earth. And the incredible thing about that verse, it's in Matthew. It says, the violent take it by force. The phraseology there is that with the same intensity that soldiers would have when they take a city, that's the same intensity that we should have when we bring heaven into earth. When we bring the peace, the blessedness, the joy, the hope, when we bring that into our city, it has to be with that same kind of intensity. You have to be able to imagine that it can happen.
Amen.
If you're overcome by the despair or the doubt or the reality of the situation, you will not be able to imagine anything different. And it's very hard to bring about any kind of change when that's the case. So that's the fifth thing. You have to be able to imagine something different. In closing, we are in good company. Those of us all of us who are doing Adopt the Block, bringing heaven to earth, recreating things, adding value to this that have been devalued. We are in good company. This is the way God operates. This is the way He's operated from the very beginning. I love the Old Testament because there is so much grace, there is so much hope, there's so much joy in the pages. There's some tough things happening too, but from the beginning, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is the God who adds value to things that are devalued. He's the God that brings order out of chaos. He's the God that breathes into humans and says, hey, you now have the power to go and create as well. That's who God is from the beginning. So we are in good company when we go out into the streets, when we adopt our neighborhood. We are in the company of God Himself. I began with Genesis, and I want to end in Revelation. Like I said, throughout the Bible, these concepts of chaos, darkness, the ocean, the deep, these kind of act as these kind of adversaries of God throughout the Bible. And again, I don't have the time to go to every single passage, but the question then is kind of like, okay, what happens to these guys in the end? What happens to chaos in the end? You know, God purposed it, He reframed it, He brought value out of it in the beginning, but at the end of the story, what does God ultimately do to these agents of chaos? There's a fascinating passage. It's in Revelation 21. I never really saw it until now, but it says this. John's talking about this new heaven and this new earth that he sees. And something fascinating takes place. He says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. This first element of chaos, the deep, the sea. In the new heaven, here will be no more. The second thing. Same chapter, a little further on, it says this. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it, and its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there.
Hallelujah.
In the end,
Amen.
chaos is completely and utterly defeated. However, we exist in this concept of the already but not yet. Jesus has already come. He has already defeated sin. He has already ushered in the kingdom of heaven. But the end, where chaos is completely defeated, is not yet. So we exist in the middle, the already but the not yet. This is our space. And in this space, we are challenged to recreate through rest, through what God's done. That is what our role is. That's what your role is. So we speak in the same language. Tonight I wanted to just kind of give you this new phrase, this new idea that you are bringing order out of chaos, that you do that through rest, that you do that through recreation. The next couple months, I'll kind of bring a similar idea, just a new phrase for us to kind of take home. But I'm for what you guys are doing. I'm so encouraged by it. I have been at the Dream Center for a couple of years, and I have never been to another city that hasn't been the block. You guys are the first. So it's incredible to see and to hear the stories and see what's happening in your guys' city. And I was telling you about this, but I learned from you. You guys are teaching us, you're informing what we do in the way, and I'm so excited to kind of spend these next couple months coming out. And I love to come out this Saturday, see you guys in action, and see kind of how you guys are bringing about this incredible recreation here in Elsinore. So thank you for your guys' time. It really means a lot to me. I appreciate getting to speak with you guys tonight. If you guys have any questions about kind of Adopt a Block in general, I know we kind of did like a 50,000-foot view of it, but is there any kind of questions you guys have about anything? I'm fine with answering a couple of you guys have. I think we have a couple of minutes. Okay, that's good. Yes?
So my area is got a lot of Hispanic speakers.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge challenge for me.
Yeah.
Because I understand a lot more than I can speak back. But what it is it's hard to get them to open their doors because it's a trust issue. I had a young kid on a Saturday come in and he speaks their language, and so we were able to make a lot of headway there.
Yeah.
So what's been your guys' experience and how have you overcome it?
Yeah.
Because you never know, it's the luck of the draw from the volunteer standpoint, right?
Yeah. The majority of our site leaders are all bilingual, so that is something that's kind of a must. I unfortunately not, so I feel your pain. I understand what it is when I speak. So honestly, I mean, the only answer I have is to learn the language, or to try to recruit someone who you know speaks it, and try to kind of bring them onto your team or whatnot. But that's something that we've noticed as well, and I've seen it happen when someone walks into context and just drops the language, and they can communicate with people. Every single wall goes down. And that's something that I think that we're realizing too. So I'm trying to initiate like a Spanish class for our team because a lot of us still don't speak it. So that's something to consider. Obviously, it's a long process, but I think if you know the language, the walls will go down. So until then, it's tough.
Elizabeth, do you want to teach a Spanish class for me? That's an awesome idea.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't got there yet. A lot of our studies have been our bilingual, but that's the direction we're going. I hope to get there soon.
Awesome.
Questions?
Fred had a question.
Yeah.
We use the word repurposed,
Yes.
which is a very good word for what you're trying to convey to us. But does the word transform also fit into that idea?
I think so. Yeah. I think that's a biblical term. I think repurposing, transforming, the same idea applies that you're taking something that was over here and you're bringing it over here.
You're not destroying it, you're
Yes.
transforming it, or repurposing it.
Yes.
You're making it, you're adding value to it that it didn't have before, but you're still working on it. That's why I pray for things that I know are not healthy for our communities, but I don't pray for their destruction. I pray for their transformation. That people who are involved in selling drugs, for example, that God would give them a new purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Not destroy them, but give them a new purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. You're absolutely right.
I just want to ask you, maybe just for the sake of our faith personally here, maybe a couple of stories of just how God's provided for needs. And I know that when I hear how God does that, I mean, I get fired up. So I'm sure you have a million stories that you could tell us, but maybe just a couple little short things of how God's provided miraculously or something.
I think God provides miraculously, but I think He also provides very naturally as well. And a lot of the things that we've seen happen are just when we commit to people and we commit to going deeper with them than we initially thought. For example, one of our guys, Samuel, he's in charge of our hot dog cart ministry. So basically every single day we have this hot dog cart, we take about maybe 200 hot dogs, and we go to neighborhoods where there's experiencing homelessness. And he dropped the story on me last week, and it just was like, oh my gosh, it was incredible. But he's a super humble guy, so he's like, oh, I don't really want to tell anybody, but but it's very natural. Like there is this gentleman on Skid Row experiencing homelessness, lost his home, lost his job. He's from Germany though, and he's not well. He's very sick, but his mom's in Germany. His mom's dying, but he can't get back. He doesn't have the money, but not only that, he doesn't have his nationalization, so he can't get his passport. So he's stuck literally in the worst kind of context, and people are trying to get a hold of him, trying to say, hey, your mother is dying, you need to be with her, why aren't you here, why are you in LA, like, what's going on? But he can't get there, and it's tough. He doesn't really know how to navigate the system. I got my passport, and that was even like a crazy thing, and I'm from here, you know, so I can imagine his frustration. So for months and for years, he's been trying to get this settled, and Samuel found out about this, and there's always a temptation when you're doing outreach to just kind of leave it surface. Like, hey, here's a hot dog, I'll pray for you, God bless you, I'll see you next week. That's the temptation.
Right.
And Samuel decided, hey, I'm going to go deeper with this guy. I'm going to commit to him and not just leave it at that. So he says, hey, I'm going to help you to get your nationalization papers. I'll do whatever it
Praise
takes.
God.
So he started giving him his extra time. Mondays are day off because we're a church, so Mondays are day off. So Mondays he would go down to Skid Row. He would go with him into the offices. It got to the point where he realized he needed to go to the congressman on the man's behalf to try to speed this process that was just taking too long. So he goes to the congressman on the man's behalf, and he just told me the other day, and this was just incredible. He, again, he's been receiving mail for this guy. He's been just doing everything for this guy. Like, he's been this man's advocate, but he committed to that. So he just told me the other day that he got word back from the congressman that what had taken literally months and years, they finally have a man's nationalization papers.
Wow.
It was incredible. That's incredible because it wasn't really a supernatural provision. It was just Samuel saying, hey, I'm going to go 10,000 miles deep with this guy. I'm not going to leave it surface level. I'm going to commit to him. And he's like, I can't do it with everyone, but I'm going to pick one person and just commit to them.
Wow.
So that's one of the most incredible things I've heard. There's a lot of stories of provision. It's been cool. People have been in need of just furniture or in need of supplies for their home, or in need of things like that. And we're a nonprofit, so we can't buy stuff. We're a big organization, but there's a lot of big costs that we have too. So we've had so many stories where just in the moment of need, just furniture is showing up, or people have donated these incredible pieces. Just like with you guys too, like having this whole thing happen. And just so many stories of that where literally like in the moment we needed it, we couldn't buy it. Things have just kind of shown up. But I think the biggest thing I've taken away is that God works supernaturally, but I think more often than not, like we are that. Like when we operate as the church, that is how God works supernaturally. That's how he brings that nationalization paper to that guy. Is when we say, hey, I'm going to go deep with you. I'm going to commit to you. I'm not just going to knock on your door. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to commit. There is some folks in our local neighborhoods, and I'm sort of real quick, their laundry machine's busted. And we were going door to door, we commit to the neighborhood, just saying, hey, we're from the Dream Center, how can we be a good neighbor? And it was a father, Louis, and a son, Louis, and Louis' girlfriend. And the father's like 95, and the son's like in the 60s. They all have all these health issues. Their laundry machine's busted, and they can't walk to the laundromat. So we're like, hey, we'll do your laundry for you. And it's kind of nasty, it's kind of weird. Like I did laundry for them for a while, like with all my stuff, and it's like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? And, but we're doing laundry for them, we're just committed. We're like, hey, we're just going to do your laundry for you, man. Like, so literally 5 months we did laundry for him.
Wow.
And then finally Louis like, hey, we kind of found a wash machine, but we don't really have a lot of money. Can you guys help us out with it? And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. So after like 5 months of doing the laundry, we helped them buy a laundry machine. They've got that now. But the incredible thing is that that's opened up so many more doors into their home, into their lives. We're painting their bathrooms right now. We're doing their lawn every other week. And these are folks who they live on the hill, and they can see the Dream Center on the other hill. And we went there before, we would give them some stuff, knock on the door, but we just said, hey, we're gonna commit to you guys. We're actually we're gonna go be with you guys. And I honestly think my life has been changed. The deeper I go, the more impactful I am touched. And I think with adopted life, I try to say this that way, but we will be changed in serving others. The degree to which we are changed depends on how deep we're willing to go with it. So, those are a few stories. Those are the ones. Yeah, so this is what happened. Other questions? I'll be around for a little bit, but honestly, thank you guys again so much for giving me Saturday night. It's so great to